Today I'm gonna show you the most insanely difficult game I have ever played. A game that was completed over the course of 4 days with more than 30 hours of playtime, all to develop a strategy that even some of the best thought to be impossible. Today we take on Phayze in Least Cash. The rules for this event are very simple. The boss has 125% speed, all monkeys and heroes are allowed, but you can only have 5 towers on the screen at the same time. When starting the game, the leaderboard looked like this. All the top scores are identical, each spending $130,370 to beat the boss, and the setup looks like this. A Mad for damage, a Moab Shove Heli for stalling, Churchill to help with the regular bloons which the Mad can't handle, and an overclock and call to arms to buff them. And this was assumed to be the optimal solution, because replacing Churchill with a cheaper hero like Isili would mean making the regular rounds impossible to defend, since Isili is not nearly as good as Churchill when it comes to popping regular bloons, and the Mad is just terrible at it. But impossible was just the level of difficulty I was looking for. We begin the game by placing a free dart monkey to defend the early rounds without having to spend any money on defense, and that way we can work up a discount village before we buy anything else and save some cash. Then we place our hero Isili, and after that the Heli. And the reason we place the Heli before the Dartling is because there is a monkey knowledge that causes the first military tower you place to get a 33% discount on the initial tower cost, and since the base cost for the Heli is more than the Dartling, we save more money by getting the discount on that tower. Then we place the Dartling and start upgrading it in preparation for the first tier. The placement here is different than the strat everyone else used. I want my Mad to be in the center so that I'm gonna be able to pop bloons on the left side of the map with my Dartling without popping bloons that are just entering the map. The reasoning goes like this. If surviving the normal rounds is already thought to be impossible, the only way to make it possible would be to carefully control when you pop which bloons, so that you can buy yourself time to get your abilities up again to survive the remaining bloons in that round, and this will become more clear when we get to the really hard rounds at 100+. Next we get another village, which will be our call to arms with jungle drums, and we also upgrade the Dartling to tier 4, and now it's time for the first boss encounter. The first tier is very simple, as the boss doesn't have a lot of HP and the Dartling can pop all bloon types, so neither the boss nor the rounds will be difficult at all. And the tier 4 Dartling can't just pop all bloon types. At this stage it's still good versus both Moab class bloons and regular bloons, and that's because Moabs at this stage have not yet begun to increase their HP, which starts happening at round 80, and we're still only encountering smaller Moab class bloons, so the Dartling can handle them quite well. And the tier 4 is quite good against smaller bloons, a trait that the tower loses once you upgrade it to tier 5 and it gets traded for more Moab damage instead. So tier 1 goes down without a fight, and then we upgrade the Heli to 013 and the village to MIB, and then we need to sell the discount village to place our NG, since we already had the maximum of 5 towers on the screen. The reason the Heli needs the crosspath upgrade is not because of the increased flight speed, but a hidden interaction that increases the knockback potency of the Moab Shove, and this will be needed for stalling later on. The regular rounds are still not an issue, so we quickly proceed to tier 2, and at this point I've upgraded the NG to an overclock, and during the kill I'm also going to get the village to call to arms and use both of them to increase the attack speed of my Dartling. I'm also using Isili's totem, which gives a lot of different buffs to all towers in range of the totem, like attack speed, pierce, and range, and right now each use of the ability drains 10 lives, but once we reach level 16 on our hero it will only drain 1 life per use, and it will also last longer. The tier 2 boss takes a little bit longer to kill, and the rounds are getting slightly harder but still not a problem. So some rounds you might have to take your focus off the boss for a second to focus on the bloons, like for example the ceramic rushes on 63, or rounds where you get several Moab spawning in quick succession. But the Moab shove can help with this too. If you have the heli right on top of the boss, the Moabs will get slowed down and you can keep targeting the boss and the Moabs at the same time. But this tier is another easy one. On the final skull I used my heli to stall one of the Moabs so I could finish the boss on this round, just to make sure I wasn't going to have any problems with the Moabs in the next round, since the boss has already gotten quite far and I almost leaked to some of the Moabs in this round. So I finish off the boss and kill the stall, and then we carry on towards tier 3. The rounds are still no problem, and we're not gonna buy anything, we're just gonna save up cash towards the final upgrade, which is the MAD that we will need for this upcoming tier. And here is where the first slightly tricky part of the run will come into play. By the time tier 3 starts, we're not even close to affording the final upgrade, which costs 65k, so we're gonna anti-stall the rounds by focusing more on the bloons than the boss itself to get the cash we need faster. Although, getting some boss damage is good too, because we want to take out the shield pretty quickly, since that causes the boss to move at a slower speed, and if we can prevent the boss from advancing on the track so much while we anti-stall, that would be helpful. And on round 87, after popping one of the ZOMGs, we finally get the upgrade, which means we are going to tear through the boss and mob class balloons, but regular balloons will now be a bigger issue, and the only time the MAD is actually good versus regular balloons is if the rocket storm ability is active. So on round 88, I move my heli to grab a little Moab just to stall for a tiny bit, and when my abilities are about to be ready, I take it out using a hex from Vasily to not get any pesky balloons, and when round 89 starts, it has a lot of fortified Moabs, so I wait for them all to spawn without popping them open, and then turn around and use my MAD ability along with the overclock, totem, and call to arms. That takes care of the Moabs and another skull off the boss, and now we only have the last bit of HP left on the boss, although for these BFBs that spawn I will also need a MAD ability, or alternatively, just take them out slowly with the hex and let the abilities come off cooldown for the next round. So now I shift my heli around to follow the BFBs and slow them down until my abilities comes off cooldown again, and then I use the hex to take them out. And then on round 90, just use the MAD ability and take down the boss. And now the easiest part of the run is over. Now there will begin to be a few slightly tricky rounds to beat due to the lack of bloon damage. And a lot of people were wondering exactly how I managed to do this, so at round 100 plus I will show all the rounds, but for the rounds up to tier 4 I'm just gonna show the tighter ones. 91 starts with a lot of fortified ceramics and some BFBs, and I start the round by tracking the balloons with my MAD and later overclock it and use call to arms, and as soon as the rocket storm ability comes back up I use it and clear the map of all the balloons and BFBs. There's still some ceramic spawning and it got really close, but I only leaked 7 lives, so only the mana shield took some damage. For 92 I moved the heli around to stall some Moabs for a tiny bit and then used the MAD ability later in the round, and I actually leaked 1 ceramic towards the end of that round. It wasn't until day 2 at round 100 plus where I really started mastering using this setup after spending countless hours optimizing how to beat the really difficult rounds. At this point, the rounds are still not very hard at all compared to later. Right now, some might take a couple of attempts, but that is nothing compared to the later rounds, which often took 3 to 6 hours for a single round. So at this point, I still don't need to do that much stalling, so I often finish the rounds with some time left on my cooldowns. So these rounds up until 100, I'm just gonna fast forward through really quickly and not really provide any commentary about. But after tier 4, I'll talk in more detail about each round. For tier 4, we're gonna need to stall round 100 throughout the entire kill so that we don't have to deal with the boss and the regular rounds at the same time. So here I place my heli near the start of the track and then use my abilities to take out most of the bloons that spawn in this round. But after finishing off a couple of more bloons with my second ability, I ran into a problem. When the boss gets outside of Seely's range, she starts attacking my stall. Turns out that this Seely placement wasn't very smart, and I didn't think about this at all before starting the game. I didn't expect her to be able to attack the stall from here. But a hotfix for this problem was for me to sell the totem whenever the boss is about to exit her range, because without the range buff from the totem she can't hit my stall. Now, this is not an ideal solution because that means that on tier 5 we will have to compromise. We can either sell the totem several times over to prevent her killing the stall, but that will lose us some boss damage, or we can stall a bloon in a different spot than everyone else, but we'll figure that out when the time comes. But now that we have a stall, we can finish the tier 4 boss in peace, and also, to prevent the stall from dying too early, I placed the totem so that it doesn't affect the heli, giving it more attack speed. Now, the heli is inside the range of the jungle drums, which is something I'll think twice about next time, because several times during this run, the stall dying early did turn out to be a problem. I also played this run without the final military monkey knowledge, so all Moabs have a bit of extra HP, and this will help me prolong my stalls. Now, will this make the regular rounds even harder? Perhaps some, but not really, since it's not the Moabs that are the biggest problem, it's regular bloons. And now that tier 4 is done, here is where the real challenge begins. Everything up until this point has been pretty reasonable, but the next 19 rounds took almost 20 hours to complete. The patience needed here was pretty crazy. Because after you've spent 4 or 5 hours on a single round and still not beat it, you start to believe that it might not be possible, and there were several times where I was pretty convinced that it might not be doable. So now we're gonna try and stall every single round to make sure I have my abilities off cooldown every single round. And sometimes beating the round is not the difficult part, but doing it while also having good uptime for the next one can be really hard, or sometimes even impossible on some DDT rounds. Round 101 is the simplest of them all, just stall one of the Moabs and kill the rest. Round 102 starts with a Hex to deal with the first few DDTs, and then Rocket Storm the bigger bloons once they've entered the map, and while stalling a BFB I take out the last few DDTs. Round 103 is also easy, we just wait a few seconds before using our abilities, and we also use a Hex to help us take out some of the bigger bloons a bit quicker when our other abilities are active. 104 was tricky because this one has 150 Moabs, a lot of BFBs and hundreds of bloons, and they also spawn in for a long period of time. So I set Isili to strong so she doesn't pop the first Moab, lock the Mad to aim away from them, and then move the heli to slow down the Moabs for a bit and then move it back to spawn. Then I use my Hex and the rest of my abilities to take out the majority of the round, and for the rest you need to aim the Mad in really good spots to get as much damage as you possibly can with it, and even so I leaked my entire mana shield but none of my actual lives. And I apologize for all the constant pausing, that's just unfortunately something you tend to see in top runs. Round 105 is a simple one, just an early ceramic rush followed by some BFBs, so all we need to do is wait a bit with the abilities and the round is fine. Round 106 is a DDT round, so here we are not going to be able to stall, so on my first attempt I wanted to use my abilities as early as possible and still survive the round, so at least I don't have that long left on my cooldowns at the end of the round. But sadly, being halfway on my cooldowns for the next round kills me because there's gonna be a rush of fortified ceramics that spawn right away. So what I had to do here was to overclock Isili before 106 starts, and then I still need to use my other abilities just like before in order to survive, but when the round ends my overclock is almost ready to be used again, and Isili will still have some time left on the buff because heroes get 60 seconds, which is equal to 133% uptime. So on the following round that starts with a fortified ceramic rush, I can now overclock my MAD, so both towers are overclocked at the same time for about a 15-second period, and that way I can survive the fortified ceramic rush without using a rocket storm. And Isili was also set to strong for the first few seconds until the ZOMGs gets inside her range, because I need her to target the fortified ceramics to defortify them early and not target the camo purples. And then I can use my rocket storm to take out the rest, and here I don't need to stall anything because the next round is just gonna be ZOMGs, which are very slow. So on 108 I can just chill for a bit until everything has spawned, and then I use my overclock early and then move my heli to where I'm gonna stall, and then I aim for the ZOMGs in the back to stall one of the BFBs that spawns from the one I pop, and then use my rocket storm and hex to clean up the rest. Round 109, we set Isili to strong for the start of the round, then we wait a bit and then use the hex and then everything else, and that takes out almost all of the faster Moabs, and the slower ones we can just avoid damaging while we wait for abilities to come off cooldown again. And then we use the abilities once more, and we make sure to do it carefully so that we save something for the heli to stall. 110 has BFBs and DDTs, and here we start the round with just a hex and avoid popping anything except the DDTs, and we do this for as long as we can, delaying using the rocket storm, and then when we do use it, we use it to clean up the map and then aim straight to spawn to take out as much as possible of this round. Then we aim the MAD to the top left to pop the remaining DDTs early so that Isili can defortify the insides early, and we also get some MAD damage on the bloons once they get to the top left, and then we only have 2 BFBs left, one of which we are stalling. 111 is just ZOMGs again, just like 108, so this is a very easy one. Just wait until they have all spawned and then use the hex and all the rest. Just be careful to not pop everything. This time I only saved a Moab, but that's enough to stall for uptime on everything except the totem, which has the longest cooldown, but I didn't use the totem in this round anyway. 112 is just BFBs and DDTs, and they spawn pretty quickly this round, so it's not a hard one. Just make sure to use the abilities and don't aim directly at spawn so you don't take out everything. 113 has a lot of fortified Moabs, some BFBs, and some regular bloons as well, but they spawn pretty quickly once again, so we just delay using the rocket storm for a bit, and then we aim straight to spawn to take out pretty much the entire round and save 1 BFB. 114 was more tricky. Here we set Isili to strong and start the round by hexing DDTs and avoiding damaging the Moabs for a bit, and then we rocket storm and clean up the map towards spawn to take out as much as possible. Then we set Isili back to first and move the heli down to where we're gonna create a stall later, and then aim the MAD to take out some more DDTs and the insides, and I almost died here. I was very close to leaking a ceramic, but the hex got it down to a yellow, so I only lost 4 lives on my mana shield. Then we want to hex instantly as soon as the ability comes back up again, so that the damaged BFBs that are about to pop don't create any children, and that way we can chill until the abilities come back up again, and then we can use them carefully to kill everything except the BFB that we leave for stalling. The next round is 115, which was absolute hell. This round has it all: Moabs, BFBs, ZOMGs, DDTs, and all come in both the fortified and non-fortified versions, and the round is long and took quite a while to figure out. So we start the round and avoid popping the DDT and then apply the hex last second, and then we need to spin around and around with the MAD to avoid popping the DDTs too early, because we have to wait until the next DDT has not only spawned but gotten to first place behind the currently hexed DDT, so that that DDT will get the hex next, and we also don't want to accidentally pop open a non-fortified DDT that isn't currently hexed. But then we have managed to delay long enough for us to be able to use our other abilities and aim straight to spawn and kill almost everything, and the stuff that survives should be just about manageable to take out without any abilities, and we are left with just 1 fortified Moab to stall. 116 has a lot of purples to start, but they are not that big of a threat, so we wait for the BFBs and ZOMGs to spawn, and then use a rocket storm and try to catch something in the back with the heli to stall. 117 is another DDT round, which isn't hard to beat, but just like the last DDT round, the hard part is beating it while having a short enough time left on your cooldowns to be able to survive survive the next round. The round is very short, and after testing a lot of different timings and different combinations of abilities in order to be able to survive the next round, this is the strange combination that ended up working. I overclock my MAD from the very start and then use my Rocket Storm, which takes out the round, but now both the overclock and the Rocket Storm has a long time left on the cooldown. What I needed to save was the Call to Arms and Hex, and I still have some time left on the overclock on the MAD, which is active for 30 seconds when used on a tier 5 tower, while the Call to Arms only lasts for 15. The Hex will be used to help take out the DDTs at the start of 118, and I won't be able to take out all of them because there is a bug that causes the Hex to disappear when it switches targets too many times too quickly. But it's just barely enough to take out most of them, and here I needed to find a very precise spot to aim in so that they pop in the right order and no children are spawned, and this is why I needed to save the Call to Arms. I needed it to be active alongside the overclock while I take out the DDTs so I can kill them fast enough when aiming down, because they need to be heading towards the MAD because you can't shoot with the grain or they will pop in the wrong order, so they have to pop within a very short bit of track length, and with those timings from the last round we beat the early DDTs in this round, and then we can easily take out the ZOMGs. And the final round before tier 5 is 119, which is an easy one. And to squeeze out a tiny bit of extra damage on tier 5, we overclock Sealy during the round and attempt to end the round just after the overclock comes back, and that way we have everything ready, and we also have 15 seconds of overclock uptime on Sealy when the boss comes. And now it is finally time for the last tier, and at this point I was so happy, thinking that the worst was behind me and that this part was going to be easy. Oh boy, was I wrong. I was about to run into the hardest part of the entire run. Here I need to stall a BFB twice, once on round 120 and once on round 121 in order to have enough stall to kill the boss. But round 120 I couldn't even beat, let alone beat and get a stall. I have to use my abilities pretty early in order to survive the beginning of the round, and then once more to survive the rest. But the second time I use my Rocket Storm ability, the boss is right on top of my MAD, blocking all of the Rocket Storm missiles, causing me to die to the bloons, and I tried this over and over, and eventually I did manage to beat the round, but it was all for nothing. Because the next round, while I did manage to get a stall, this stall won't be enough now since I didn't get a stall on the round before. This BFB will die too early. And on top of that, look at how far the boss has gotten, and I haven't even taken out the shield of the first skull yet because I needed to focus my MAD on the bloons in order to survive. So even if this stall lasted forever, I wouldn't be able to kill the boss in time. At this point I was pretty devastated, and I thought this might actually be impossible like everyone said, and I had just been wasting all this time attempting something silly. But then something happened. I went back to 120 trying to get a stall when this happened. Some weird bug caused Sealy's hex to multiply, so I had hexes on several targets at the same time. In this moment I was very confused, and I wasn't even sure if I had seen this before, but I realized that maybe this was my ticket to beating the boss. But sadly, in that attempt I didn't get a stall, so it was unusable. So now began the journey to try to recreate this bug while also managing to get a stall. And oh boy, that was easier said than done. So I looked back at the recording, seeing what abilities I was using at what timings and where I was aiming, etc. And I tried to do the exact same thing for 6 hours straight, without getting the bug to happen even once again. And at that point I felt pretty done for the day and decided to get some sleep and think about the problem and come back fresh the next day. But the next day I was still struggling to get the bug to happen again, so I decided to try out some different timing, so I started by overclocking Sealy at the start of the round instead of the MAD. And then I got the bug once more, finally. But just like last time, I didn't get a stall and I also died. which had me so frustrated smoke was coming out of my ears. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel. By overclocking Isili instead of the MAD, I was able to get the bug to happen somewhat consistently now, about once every 15 attempts, so about once every 15 minutes. What happens with this bug is that sometimes when you have a hex on a Moab and the bloon behind it is a damaged BFB, if the BFB pops right before you pop the hexed Moab, the hex will transfer over to each of the 4 Moab children of the BFB, multiplying your active hex. And the reason it was easier to replicate with Isili overclocked is because then she will apply an amount of damage to the BFBs that fits very well and makes them pop with much better timings as I'm popping the hexed Moabs with my MAD. So after a few more hours of attempts, I finally got the hex bug to happen and get a BFB stalled at the same time. Once more, the feeling of euphoria returned and I could taste victory. So I took out the first skull before ending the stall, because remember that the next stall we want to have in a location that is outside Isili's range even when she is affected by the totem. So then I end the round, back out to make a save, and then on 121 we move our heli to where the bloons are spawning so that it catches a BFB, and then we wait a bit and then use our rocket storm to take out all the other BFBs and Moabs. And when the abilities come back up again, we use them to take out the ZOMGs, and once that's done, it should be smooth sailing. Now we have a stall that will last until the end of the fight and we can focus on just taking out the boss. I was so nervous at this point, and apparently rightfully so. As the boss got closer and closer to the exit, it became more and more clear that despite me managing to use the Isili bug to take out round 120 faster and get more damage on the boss, and despite having the proper stalling this time, I was still missing damage. 300k worth of damage. But I tried round 121 again, using my abilities sooner at the start of the round when I have to deal with the bloons, so my first 2 abilities dealt more damage to the boss and was used sooner so I would have time for 1 more ability before the boss exits the map. This improved the result from missing about 300k damage down to about 180k, but that is still way too much. There is no way I'm gonna be able to add another 180k damage in this round. And then I realized what I had to do. I had to go back to round 120 and get the Isili bug the hard way. The way I got it the first time by overclocking the MAD instead of Isili, and that way I'm gonna be able to get more damage onto the boss on round 120. And I remind you that I tried getting the Isili bug to happen while overclocking the MAD for 6 hours straight without getting it to happen even once before. So this was a tough pill to swallow. But after a bit of practice and working very carefully on my timings, I realized a way that I could get the bug to happen about once every 15 attempts with this strat too. And it has to do pretty much only with how long I aim the MAD towards spawn when using the ability at the start of the round. Now, the MAD is shooting so fast that getting precisely the right amount of missiles to hit the ZOMGs and BFBs behind the boss before you aim the MAD away is pretty rare, so I use the boss timer to try and figure out at which time I need to aim the MAD away from spawn. And after a good while I managed to do it again. I got the bug while overclocking the MAD and I got a stall. So once again I popped the first skull and then finished the round, and now we are all set, right? Wrong. Turns out I had ended the round with incorrect timings. Phayze pulls bloons towards itself every 24 seconds, and with the timing I had ended the round with, the boss was pulling the bloons at the worst possible time, making it impossible for me to get a stall on 121. So then it was back to 120 once more to try to do the same insanely difficult thing again once more and end the round with perfect timing. This time I'm gonna get it perfect, and I'm also gonna get even more damage on the boss by making some small adjustments. After the ability finishes, instead of turning the Mad to the right, I turn to the left so I can continue attacking the boss for about 3 more seconds while my overclock and call to arms is active, adding a tiny bit of extra damage, and then we hex the Moabs and make sure that we pop one right after the first BFB pops to get multiple hexes, and then we activate all the abilities, taking out everything except the stall and one ZOMG. Then, once the abilities are up again, we take out that ZOMG and then focus on the boss, and since the first stall is at spawn, we sell the totem when the boss is getting close to exiting Isili's range to make sure she doesn't kill the BFB, and then we use our abilities one more time to take out the first goal, and then we wait until our abilities are almost up again, and then we look for the Phayze pull effect, indicated by the removal of camo detection, and as soon as that happens, we end the round. Now the next pull will happen 24 seconds after that one, so we move the heli on top of the new spawn point and then use the rocket storm as early as we can while still taking out the Moabs and BFBs, and then the next time we use it to take out the ZOMGs. Now surely this time it would be enough, and by the time the second skull had popped I already knew that this was it, and I let out a laughter in relief.
Oh my god.
At this point I had probably spent somewhere around 30 hours on this boss, all to make a strat work that I wasn't even sure was gonna be possible at all, and this boss had consumed me over the past few days. This was the last day of the event, the hours were running out, and the day before I went to sleep at 11 but couldn't fall asleep until 4 AM because I couldn't stop thinking about the boss, thinking about how I was gonna make this happen and make sure it wasn't all for nothing. I have never tried this hard in a boss event before. This is the most amount of effort I have ever put into a boss, and I'm so glad the strategy turned out to work. Putting this much time into a single boss event is not something I'm going to do very often, but damn, it is fun to do sometimes. Despite all the pain of getting stuck on a single round for several hours multiple times, despite having to recreate a bug I didn't initially understand, and all the do-overs, I love this shit. The feeling I had when taking out the boss was awesome, and this time I had way more damage than I needed, so now I just needed to kill the stall and it would all be over.
Yes! Oh! I'm the champ! I'm the champ! I'm the champ! Whew. Holy. Wow.
And there it is, the impossible proved possible. Now there is the question, with 13 hours left on the event, was there anyone else out there who was also working on the same strat who is also about to finish their game? And turns out there was, seemingly 2 people, one who used the same strat but also bought laser shock for the Mad to make the bloons a little bit easier to deal with, and a second player who used the same strat but discounted the NG instead of Isili. That was a big blunder on my side. Now I don't want to sound like a sore loser here, but F this guy, man. Apparently, according to all the pro boss players, this guy is a well-known cheater who's uploaded videos of runs that are obviously cheated, and just 2-3 weeks ago, back when we played Least Here's Vortex, this guy was removed from the top of the leaderboard because once again he got caught cheating. But this time he was not caught, so he was not removed from the leaderboard. And that could mean 2 things: either he just didn't get caught, or this time he decided to do a legit run for once, which is entirely possible because I'm quite sure that getting Isili on round 45 instead of round 9, which is needed to get that score, shouldn't cause any critical problems to the strat. But I guess we'll never know. Either way, the medal is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you like and subscribe, baby! Stay tuned for more boss videos and watch me smack the crap out of everybody on the leaderboard. Best boss player to ever walk the earth, Mac and Rules top 1 every week!